Alrighty, so let me get started and introduce what this session will be about. Right, I am going to finally full screen this for anyone who's been waiting for that. There we go. So, uh, so my name is Aniket Kadam. I'm a senior Android developer at 100ms. I help build the Android SDK, and I really love being part of the community. So when they said like, "Hey, do you want to host this talk?" I'll be like, "Great, let's see." The silence and presenting to my empty kitchen is a bit strange, but I hope that by the end of this, we can all talk in the chat and maybe we'll make some of your speakers and we'll get to know each other a little better. So let me talk a little bit about what the company does. So 100ms is it builds an audio video SDK, and what we do is like so we have an Android SDK, we have an iOS SDK, we've got a web one, we're building stuff for Flutter and React Native, and you can get templates for virtual events, online classrooms, audio rooms. We've got blog posts out about how to make your own Zoom, how to make your own Clubhouse, stuff like that. So just take a look, and it's free to try. It's free to like 10,000 minutes per month. So you can get pretty popular just on our free templates. So just try it out. And what our agenda for today is, we are going to have a first talk by uh, by by Honey Sonwani, which is going to be on the internals of Dagger and Dependency Injection. She goes old school without hilt, and we learn a lot about how Dagger really works without all of the fancy magic that we've gotten used to these days. And then we'll be talking with Rivu about Jetpack Compose, and you can also do an AMA with him. This is going to be a roundtable. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the concept of a roundtable, it's an artifact of when we used to be in the physical world, where instead of having speakers on a stage and then we're all audience away from it, we have everyone around. We used to physically arrange people in a circle and then have conversations about things. So there would be a generalized topic. In this case, the topic is Jetpack Compose, and we'll be inviting questions from the audience. You can go for a real-time exchange. It's not going to be a regular talk, and I think you'll enjoy that. So you can also join us on our Discord. So uh, there you can find out more about new events, whatever community programs we're doing, maybe some resources. We take our Discord pretty seriously. If somebody's talking about feedback here, there the CEO gets to the CEO and CEOs. The CEO and CEOs are the first one to notice. So if you've got opinions about the SDK, if you've got questions about what's happening, just ping us there, and it's going to go pretty high up. All right, so let's get started with the first talk, which is by Honey about Dagger. So let's take it away, Honey.
Thank you, Aniket. 1 second, please.
Oh, by the way, this platform which you're looking at is built on our SDK as well. There is an Android app, which I guess nobody will be able to install right now, but we'll get to it. All right, whenever you're ready, Honey.
Yeah, Aniket, can you all see my screen for starters?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aniket. Hi, my name is Honey, and I work with Obvious. If you don't know about Obvious, we're a design and product consultancy. I'm here to talk about dependency injection in Dagger, specifically internals of Dagger. In my own abstract theory, I kind of think of Dagger as something that helps us understand why creating new instances can be problematic and how we can leverage dependency injection for it. I know if you've just realized that OMG, this is another Dagger talk, and I feel like I know a lot of people around me have this opinion of Dagger being difficult to understand. And I kind of also realized that no documentation kind of proves that wrong. So I want to shed some light on that and kind of tell you all that this is going to be an advanced darkness because we're not going to read about how we implement Dagger in the project or basically reading how to implement in the project and all sorts of things. We're basically doing Dagger internals and dependency injection and how we combine all of this together. Majorly, we're going to cover dependency injection, how Dagger satisfies dependency injection, what do we get from Dagger, and how Dagger abstracts a dependency injection into and what it gives out to us. Yeah. So a little about me. I like a lot of outdoors and indoors only for sleep. But out of all, I feel like I kind of like food the most. If you're thinking that this is a partial talk on food, then I will not deny. So we're going to have food explorations through this. Make it a little dependency, make it a bit of interesting for dependency injection to be a little more smoother for us and have better memory of what Dagger is instead of looking at the documentation and being horrified by it. So dependency injection, what it is. Um, so I'm going to quote Jake Wharton for this and say that this is a pattern that requires no library to use. While he said that, I also understood that this kind of has its own ups and downs to it. But majorly, it is still very important for us to understand whether why do we need a library for it, and without library as well. If you look at dependency injection, all of us kind of have it in the projects, whether we know about it or not. You'd ask me how come. Let's think about food and also together about dependency injection. So class ramen here, let's consider ramen being the class and it being dependent on egg. So egg being we'll always have to initialize egg instance inside the class ramen, and we'd have class chicken instance inside class egg. If you were to look at this example in the code, this will look something like this. Summarizing it, uh, so this kind of describes how we have. So basically, if you were to explain it in a more technical manner, we'll have eggs as a new instance inside ramen. We'll have different types. So all of so summarizing all of this will as the basic understanding of dependency injection would be separating a behavior of classes from its required classes. So when I say separating from its required classes, ramen requires egg, but egg as a behavior from a different has different types of eggs, will be into a different class with different with its own. Yeah, summarizing it here. So it always to software engineering principles, inversion of control software engineering principle, where dependencies come from outside. So both of these are kind of interdependent on each other. When I say dependencies come from outside will also mean each of the class will have single responsibility principle to provide to another class. So it yeah. I feel like a lot. I see this. When I talk about Dagger. I still see a lot of the faces kind of crying because they don't understand what is happening inside. Anyway, so the major problem is if the current dependency injection without library as a pattern works and it's benefiting the same to us, why use a library and go through the Dagger documentation? I know. So this emoji kind of also defines my exact emotion when I wanted to learn Dagger. Yeah. Hmm. Two of the major things that dependency injection does this for us if you were not to use a library. This creates a lot of boilerplate code and majorly memory issues in your app. If you were to build scalable app and 1 year down the line, if this will be inevitable for you to, this scenario will be inevitable, you'll kind of have to face some memory issues. It will be kind of the tide. So the high tide will kind of come onto the project, and the tide is going to take the people that are working on, and it's going to drown it all. Hmm. So far we've covered dependency injection and as a pattern how it benefits our software engineering principles as well. and covering the drawbacks of it. Heading to Dagger for dependency injection. Uh, yeah, I saw that. I kind of also saw how we started with having a Dagger uh, debate in the chat, kind of how people are still using Dagger and some people aren't. So I know some people still have this very hard opinion of why Dagger it's been so many years. But I also believe and hear that devil is in the details. Yeah. Before we move on to the abstraction of Dagger, let's start with a very simple fun fact about Dagger. So Dagger creates an object graph. It's basically a tree of object instances that compiler goes through from bottom to top for us to for it to figure out where to provide the dependency from. So in this example, if Dagger creates the tree, this is a tree, and all the arrows are kind of pointing in the same direction, which says this is a single directed graph. And you'd also notice that none of these nodes are kind of pointing to itself. That's the definition of acyclic graph. If we were to put all of this together, it is a directed acyclic graph, which is DAG, and DAG became Dagger. Yeah. If we were to explain in the food, coming back to food, and then looking at Dagger through this. So ramen, right, so far was dependent on egg. If we were to see it in a graph, it has all of the ingredients, and all of these ingredients will be provided from all different classes. Coming, all of these instances will be initialized inside ramen. Uh, so when we initialize all of these inside ramen, this is Dagger will create a graph out of this and give it to us. Yeah, but anyway, what's in the name? We'd still have to understand what do we get from Dagger. Hmm. Yeah. So this talk is majorly not about how we implement Dagger in the project. So I'm going to go through what Dagger gives it to us in very food level examples, and then head into abstraction of Dagger. Yeah, so object graph, when we want to create an object graph inside Dagger, we'll tell them that we'll have an annotation that tells them which is at the rate component, and we define injectors inside of views, which will tell the Dagger that this is the graph that we want to create. But if we were to have classes that we want to create dependencies of and inject inside Dagger, we'll have Dagger no with annotation inject. Uh, Another thing that we'd want, so we'd in the project there are some dependencies that we do not own inside the project. Some are independent of our project, some are inbuilt, and some are interfaces that we'd still want Dagger to know about. In those scenarios, we'd have at the rate module, we create different modules, and we have functions inside it which which will define it as at the rate provides. So we're providing a dependency to Dagger which we do not own in the project, hence this. So defining scopes for it, we'll have different kinds of scopes inside project. We can define app scope, application scope, context scope. I think majorly that all of us might be familiar with would be singleton as a scope. That means that if you all don't know, that means that Dagger would only create one instance of that class and not more. For qualifier and named, if you want to have different objects at the same time, let's say in the same class, we need app context and activity context. For that, as a parameter, we'll always have context as a parameter. So Dagger would not know which dependency to provide. If we want to have access to same types of parameters, we'd tell Dagger using qualifier or named. If we use named, we'll I don't see this as a drawback, because we're using it currently. But if you were to use @named annotation for describing different contexts to Dagger, we'll have to have hard-coded strings inside which defines the context. Yeah. Lastly, we inject Dagger into using inside our application class for it to run at the compile time. Dagger's abstraction. How does Dagger do abstraction? We created a graph. We know how the name is, how the name combined to becoming Dagger. We still want to know abstraction. If you all, so I know this still feels like, d- yeah, do we really want to know the abstraction? Is this really helpful? But if people kind of, it kind of is same that we use in the project, same code that we use in the project that Dagger creates is for us. So if it's easy that if you all understand the, if all of us understand the abstraction out of it. 1 second, please. Yeah. So Dagger majorly uses provider interface. Dagger creates factories for all of the injections that you do inside Dagger. We'll get to how does Dagger create factories and how does Dagger know that which factories to create. But for starters, we need to understand inside factory, how would it create a factory and how does provider work out of it. So inside every factory, it extends an interface called factory. So factory interface is basically an encapsulation of provider interface. And provider interface is basically which returns a new instance of every invocation. It is basically returning a value to us, whatever we provide. Yeah. How would Dagger decide which factories to create? Coming back to it, uh, yeah, with the diagram, let's see. So you created a Dagger graph using @component. Dagger can create factories for all the scoped and unscoped, redefining what scoped unscoped means. That we did before. It's basically defining scopes like singleton, app scope, application scope, all of this. Factories will be created depending on whether it will create a factory for everything that we inject. Let's say we inject uh, a class. We injected a class with multiple parameters. That means multiple dependencies inside it. We'll have individual factory classes for all the dependencies inside that class and also for that class. For each provide annotation inside modules, each provide will contain dependencies. Those dependencies will also have a factory function, factory class, sorry. For when we say component dependencies here, it's basically dependencies for our views, that's activities and fragments. All of these will have will be inside the Dagger graph. Yeah. Now that we're thinking, how does now that we know how which factories does Dagger create, we'd want to know how does factory look like. 1 second, please. Yeah. How does Dagger create a factory? Factory class looks like? How do we read a factory class? I'm sure when we go through dependency and library codes, few of us, mostly all of us in the start kind of feel very scary. How do we read it? Do we want to jump into that? And most of us, I kind of also procrastinated a lot before I understood all of this. So this is what, if we remove all the null checks inside our factory classes, this is how it will look like. Every uh, every class will extend a factory class. Yeah, sorry about the comment in the header. Yeah, but about the factory class, this will have a provider interface. So factory extends provider. That means that basically means we'll override the get function inside every factory that Dagger creates. So inside get, we send the instance of the object that we want to provide. For create function inside factory, it's basically for Dagger graph to know that this is the instance of the factory that we're creating. Yeah. So this kind of covers the abstraction and how it builds inside of it, and um, covers the abstraction of Dagger inside factories as well. Y'all can reach me out or ask questions if y'all need to. If y'all have anything that's something that I didn't understand. Also y'all can reach me out on Twitter. Uh, but thank you all for listening. I love feedback, criticism, anything that you all have.
Right.
Over to you, Aniket.
Yeah, thanks. Would you be open to taking questions now, Honey?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, you can drop them in chat. You have any questions? Questions about Dagger for Honey? That's it. Once, going twice. Alrighties. Uh, Looks like you did a really good job. Thanks so much, Honey.
Thank you, Aniket.
So, alrighties. So now, that like I'm just curious again, like how many of y'all are not using any kind of dependency injection at all? Anyone?
I'm curious too.
Just drop that in chat if you're not. Ajit Sharma, right? Right? Okay. Anyone else? Just one. There's like no other apps in India which don't have. Ah, there we go. Right. We got some. Excellent. Right. So,
Mm.
right now we've got a couple of people talking about it. Right. So, um, do you feel like you're missing? Oh, Cred doesn't use any DI. That's
Oh wow,
quite surprising.
That's surprising.
Yeah, that's
really
it
surprising.
doesn't
Yeah.
feel right. Okay, but okay, I'm sure they have their reasons. We should get someone from Cred to talk now. All right, so Chilak Kapati, if you know someone at Cred who'd like to talk about why we shouldn't use DI, let me know. Right, just find me on Twitter, uh, and let me know why we shouldn't. All right, that's really interesting because I found DI very helpful. And if I and like the first time I started out trying it, I think was I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Rivu was the one who was speaking that day, but he was definitely speaking the same day that I heard about it. And then I was like, yeah, I should really try it out. Uh, so cool. All right. Thanks. So you got some interesting opinions of DI. I'd love to hear about those on Twitter. You can tweet at us also at 100ms live. Uh, hmm. So let us know your opinions about Dagger or not using Dagger or Coin if someone really doesn't like uh, runtime safety, right? So
I have something to say here. So I am also in favor of Dagger, personal opinion. But Coin also provides compile time safety. There's an added step to it. It's not as easy as Dagger, the
yeah.
compile time safety, but yeah, Coin also does provide.
Oh, you mean like by trying to access everything in the graph and seeing if anything crashes?
No, by executing code, basically a terminal
Yeah, yeah.
command.
You gotta like run it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you don't have to run it on your device. So it tries to basically access the graph itself, just like how Dagger does it by itself. It
Oh,
doesn't require you to run a command,
cool.
but for Coin you have to run a command.
Oh, cool. So they could very easily have taken my biggest objection against it away. All right. Cool. Sounds good. All right. Now, I guess with that, we could lead into our next conversation, which is with Rivu about Jetpack Compose. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept of a roundtable, uh, let me let me remind you that over here we are not doing a standard talk. We want to hear we want to hear your opinions. So the easiest way to do that is to just drop that in the chat, and then we'll talk about it. If you have a lot to say, maybe we'll invite you up as a speaker as well. So let's get to it. with Rivu. So, Rivu, tell us, first of all, tell us something about yourself before we get started with this.
Uh, so, I'm from Kolkata and currently I don't work anywhere. Uh, I used to work at Gojek, Paytm, and Byju's. And yeah, that's all about me.
Yeah, with probably some exciting things still upcoming.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm working on
Cool.
a project that I am planning to make open source that is pays in tech. So that actually, what we are planning to build is a open source platform for salary aggregation, as well as we are planning to build some salary negotiation mentorship that would be cost effective for Indians, and probably some mentorship would be free as well.
Cool. We got a founder in our midst. Alrighty. So are you, so like, would you like to tell us a bit of the history of design in Android and how we ended up at something like Compose?
Sure. So, Android design system started in a very simple way, right? Earlier days, there was not much. There was linear layout, relative layout, right? And in XML. And then they added a lot of things. In came the constraint layout, which I really liked, right? Uh, but still, Android design system was kind of a mess, in my opinion. Even with constant layout, everything was flattened, but still. For example, one good example is that data binding, right? Data binding is a very controversial topic in Android. Some people like, some people don't like. I won't get into that right now. But what I will tell you is that in web, data binding is way too easy and it's a no-brainer, right? But data binding was never able to get that in Android because it was way too complicated with Android's XML view system. And views also have hierarchy, right? So when you want to add some custom views, add some custom things, you have to implement a view. Now there are also text view and edit text and all those things are there. So for OTP, if you see OTP, in some cases all the text functions doesn't work uh, because some implement text view while implementing OTP views, or some implemented edit text, right? That actually complicates a lot of thing in Android. So with Jetpack Compose, what the team intended was to actually remove those complications and establish a way to do declarative UI coding easily. So yeah, that's why Jetpack Compose came, and I would say it conquered as well.
So like, what did you say declarative UI coding is? I'm sure, like, probably a lot of people aren't familiar with this terminology.
Yeah, see, declarative UI is nothing complex, right? If you look at HTML, right, plain simple HTML, that is, I would say, the first declarative coding or UI, declarative UI coding is, right? That actually gave birth to this concept. Now, what we generally mean by that is that instead of describing everything, um, uh, we leave out some to the basically compiler to actually put it in a efficient way. And yeah, that is mostly it, because declarative UI doesn't have a very good definition, to be honest. For different platforms, it means different. For Compose, along with declarative, it's also reactive. So that means whenever your state changes, Compose will automatically update to reflect that state. And it has some memory advantages as well. Right? For example, if a part of your UI changed, it should only update that part. Now, it was supposed to be implemented in that way, but when Compass released earlier, right? I'm talking about before production release. Then it whenever something changed, the whole UI used to change. But then they said they will update that After that, I haven't checked if they have actually implemented that update or not. That when something changed, only a small part of it, which only a small part of AI, which is dependent on that state, would update.
That sounds like a really helpful thing. Like many times when I'm using apps, also it's like I change something and I have gotten used to going back and coming, back out of the screen and coming back to the screen just to make sure I've got the latest data.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Android, like there has been a good way to reactively update the screen for a long
Yeah.
time now, but I think
So
it's
what we used to do in in current way, right, with XML, our activity would have this much size of render code, right? When state is this, do that. When state is that, a lot of if else, if else, if else, if else.
yeah.
Now I'm not saying Compose will magically remove that. It's totally upon you how you implement the states in Compose. In Compose, states can be implemented in multiple different ways. But yeah, Compass will give you an option to manage that efficiently,
Yeah.
and your activity code will look pretty clean.
Cool. So, how many people here have not used Composed at all so far? You can like press the little raise hand button, and I'll see it. Yeah, we got one raised hand. Is that it? Oh, got a couple of raised hands. Nice. All right. So, in your apps, like when you haven't used Compose, do you still have a good way to reactively update your UI? I mean, I'm sure there is, but my question is, are you all able to do it? Like, do you find the concept easy? Yeah. Like, who finds it easy? Still keep your hand raised, right? All right. So there's like one out of all of those people who still finds that concept easy. So let's see here that there's a really good practical benefit to learn Compose. We are probably we are probably like many times in Android we have a lot of things which you can just keep on learning. But here, like Jetpack Compose actually solves a real problem that that we see in many apps, that I've personally faced in many apps. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the problems that, like something more of the problems that Compose solves, like
Uh,
for you as an Android developer?
yeah. Basically, as I said, managing states reactively. Right now, what I mean by updating or reacting to state. Right. Basically, what happens is that in Compose, first of all, if you are not using a state-based pattern, you should use it. You should have a view state instead of having a number of flags. Then, whenever we update the state, right, the portion of the UI that's dependent on that state will update without you requiring to set, like, for example, if you have a flag on, your button should be clickable, right? It's a simple case what's there in multiple almost all apps. So what we end up do we end up writing four lines. If flag dot is clickable or if state dot is clickable, button dot set dot enable click, and then button dot set on click listener, and else button dot disable click, right? But with Compose, you just set you just pass on that variable in the button modify itself. You will in the modify you will just check if is enabled, in enable click, else disable click, right? That's one way. Another way is to just pass the value to modify itself. Just if it is true, modify will enable click, or if it is false, modify will disable click itself. So yeah, this is one way, having a more readable and easy manageable code. One of the benefits that Compose provides. Another benefit is nowadays a lot of people talk about single activity apps, right? You have single activity and every other screen is fragment or view. Now, we all Android developers, we tried both, right? We tried creating our own navigation maps and having views, having a fragment, and it's a mess. Navigation component aids to that. It solves a lot of things. right? You don't have need to have your custom own navigator and navigation map and all those things. Uh, but still, a lot of Android developers are not in favor of fragment. Compose actually efficiently solves that. If you see my Compose repos in GitHub, right? I have not mentioned it for some time. I will do that. But yeah, you can see that I have two screens, right? And I don't have any other fragment or anything. It's completely managed by Compose. Now, I don't recommend using it that way. If you have, say, 100 amounts of screens, you should manage it better for that. There are also examples on Jetpack News app, right? Jetpack News app is a Compose example. Patil has some great examples on Compose with Naughty Kitty project, right? You can look at that, and all of that. In all of that, you can see that we manage screens easily in Compose, with or without navigation component, and without the burden of managing another activity or fragment or whatever that is, right? And it's also reusable. So if you are, for example, the compose that is getting used in a full screen, like a complete app, complete activity, right? You can put that same compose in a small portion, right? So this is completely reusable. So reusability also increases. Managing custom views, that's what I first talked about, right? You don't have to create n numbers of custom class. You just need to create function, and if you compose it efficiently, you can reuse the same function for some added functionality as well, right? So yeah, these are some of the benefits, not all. These are the benefits what I find most useful.
So for those of you looking for that repo, I've dropped the link to Revo's repo in the chat. So just take a look at that. And also, let's have a show of hands for. I'm sure everyone here has probably moved at least from Java to Kotlin, so you have the experience of learning all new syntax for something. How many of you enjoyed that? Let's see a bunch of raised hands for who enjoyed switching to a whole new language for all of your to remain an Android program. Yeah. Okay, so it looks like we did a large number of our people do enjoy just learning new stuff. That's great. So you shouldn't have any problem with Compose. So let's find out Rivu's opinion. So like, what do you think, Rivu? Like, so I already know that you learn a lot of new stuff. There's your repos are full of it. You've written books. So maybe you're like not the average person when we're asking about new things. But
Trust me, I
how,
am an average person.
yeah, okay, let's see. And modest as well. So, what was it like learning a completely different language for expressive UI? Because I've tried
Yeah,
it too. It's nothing like
yeah.
XML. I think you have to
So
think about
let
space.
me share how I came to first know about Compose, right?
Yeah.
That was really exciting. And for a long time, I was not able to talk about it. Uh,
Okay.
so at that time, I used to work at Byju's, and Byju's is a Google partner organization, right? So, what is a Google partner organization? That means whenever basically the Android team is facing some issues with any Google technologies, they can directly reach out to a representative of Google for help, or whenever there is some Google developers UI UX DX rather developer experiment is going on, uh, Google generally invites Byju's to share their opinions on different technologies and platforms. Now, Byju's is not only a Google developer partner organization in India. There are there are lots of companies, but yeah, so Byju's was one, and I was part of that team at that point. And so Google team reached out to my lead, and they said, "Hey, we have some interesting new thing coming up, and we want to do a session on developer experience or user experience on those tools. So if any two of you can come down." So we had a discussion in the team, and we decided that me and the lead will go. And they said, "Yeah, don't come on same date. come on different date. So this was new, right? Because otherwise, what happens is that they call the whole team together only, right? Whoever is coming, come together. But yeah, I we thought yeah that is quite surprising. But yeah, we booked appointments and I went, right. So I will only share about my experience from now onwards, from this point onwards. So I went to the Google office, and they invited me in a room, and there was a MacBook in front of me. There was at least five screens all across the walls, right? And the lady let me have a seat, and she said, "Yeah, don't get surprised if face pops out in any of those screens. So this is completely live. This experiment we are doing here, and if anyone is online, they can join and see it. Right? Don't get surprised if you see a face in any of the screens." I said, "Okay." Then she unlocked the MacBook, and there was Android Studio. Uh, and some documentation. So she basically focused on the documentation part and said, read it. And after reading it, there would be some things to implement. So I went through that. And that's how I first came to know about Compose. And at that time, they were still using the XML tags, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so that was quite interesting, and I found, hey, this is interesting. Like I can write these view tags in my Kotlin file. Okay, let's see how it what it does. And as I kept playing, right, I became more and more intrigued about it. So at that time they had some implementation of the current uh, uh, lazy row, right? At that time, they didn't call it lazy row. They did it. They called it Reactively only. But yeah, they had some implementation of that, not completely bug free, but yeah. And I really got interested when I got to that point, managing a list. Right. Everyone who wrote an adapter ever in their life, they knows what managing a list is. But with when I got to that point, managing a list seemed so easy, right?
Yeah.
At that point, I got really excited, and yeah, that was my interaction. I did something, and I really liked it. And after that, I waited 1 year eagerly. When will they launch it? Right. At that time, I didn't know the name of the technology. They told me something. I even forgot the name. They told me something weird name. So yeah, they went out with Compose, and then in Google I/O there was an event called Declarative UI. When I saw Declarative UI, I instantly understood. Yeah, this is what I was waiting for. So yeah, I was excitedly waiting for that, and then they launched. After the launch, I instantly cloned the Android open source project. That was the first time for me. Before that, I never cloned Android open source project, and I started playing with it. And yeah, I still like it, and I do like it today as well.
Cool. That's awesome. Um, that would be one heck of an introduction to Compose, where suddenly live coding unexpectedly.
Yeah, exactly. It was a unexpected thing for me, and I really loved it. I would say at that point, uh, like at that point, we had no idea of something like Compose will ever come, right? Swift UI was still not announced at that point. So yeah, that was kind of surprising thing to me, and yeah, I really loved it.
So, all right, that seems pretty good. So now that you've used Compose a while, do you think that there are some areas where the XML approach is just better? Like, what kind of drawbacks are you seeing in Compose as it
See,
is right now?
Compose has some drawbacks, right? But if you ask me why XML is better, I don't see any. The drawbacks with Compose is with performance. There's a very slight delta uh, in performance, and that too when not when you are completely using Compose for your entire app. That's when you are doing a mix and match, right? You have some XML views, and on top of that, some part of the view is composed, right? Uh, that's when you see a little performance drop, and that too the delta is very small, and I don't think it's noticeable by the user in production build. In dev build, it's definitely noticeable, but as soon as you add ProGuard and create a release build, the performance improves, and there's still a delta between full XML and XML plus compose, or full compose. In full compose is better than XML plus compose. Full XML is better in performance than compose, but the delta is very small.
I see. Okay. But all right, so that makes sense. So, do you think that that for people who are just starting to learn
Mhm.
Android now, that would it be helpful for them? Like, would it be helpful or would it be too overwhelming to learn about Jetpack Compose?
See, Android is really fast nowadays, right? When we first started Android, it was the simple thing. You learn about couple of things, you learn about activities, services, and all those things, and you are good to go. There's nothing else. Uh, Today, that it's different. There are a lot of things. So what I suggest is that if you feel really interested in Compose right now, right? Or if your company or organization is using Compose or planning to use Compose in next few months, then you should start looking at Compose, right? It's same to what I suggest about everything else. If you are using something, or if you need to use something for your job, or if you are completely interested in something, then you should focus on it.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's completely okay. And yeah, XML views are not going away anytime soon, because migrating to Kotlin was a no-brainer. It was very easy thing to do. Migrating to Compose is not gonna be that easy, because of the performance impact I just told you about, right? And also there are some other things. I will talk about it when we get there. But yeah, migrating to Compose is not gonna be that much of a no-brainer. So XML views are not going away anytime soon. So you will have your time to learn Compose.
So, so does anyone in the audience have some questions to ask Rivu about this? Like maybe, and he's been in really like management capacity as well. So you can ask him about how do I convince my leadership to use Jetpack Compose?
Yeah,
Or
before going there, uh, I would like to address another thing here. So migrating to Compose, right? Migrating to Compose has a lot of concerns. First is that what I already talked about, performance impact, but it's negligible. Uh, Another thing is that even the Compose is full in production, one point, more than 1 point has reached out, right? It's not 1.0.0, it's probably 1.1 right now. Uh, yeah, 1.1.1. So, but still, when you go to a little complex UIs, right? For example, when you want a pagination enabled endless scrolling view pager, right? At that time, you will see it's not so easy to implement with Compose. Uh, Even if you don't go there, for a lot of complex UI components, you still have to use experimental, right? So those APIs are not yet production ready. So yeah, simple compose text view screen are production ready, but complex UIs are not yet completely production ready. So while migrating, you should keep in mind that's what I always say. You should start migrating to Compose, but choose very simple screens, right? Very straightforward and simple screens with much complexity. Try migrating them to Compose, and then you can slowly start migrating other screens. Also, before starting to migrate to Compose, you should notice that you should make sure you have a state-based architecture. You use MVI, MVVM, MVP, doesn't matter. You can add a view state to any architecture you are currently using. State-based architecture doesn't mean you have to use, say, MVI or MVRX, Mavericks, for example. Yes, those are great with state-based architecture, but you can use any architecture, even if you are using MVC. You should not use, but yeah. For Compose, it doesn't matter. You can still use that, and you can introduce a state class uh, either through data class or a shield class. There are certain benefits to each of them, and you should research about it. But yeah, you should introduce a state-based architecture first, and you should not use any arbitrary flag in the activity that we are used to do till now, because with those compose will become even more complex. But if you are using state-based architecture, it's completely simple and straightforward.
So we've got a couple of audience questions here.
Mhm.
So let's take a look at this. Um, it is so she Harsha is asking, how do you organize your composables? He likes to separate his UI completely from the data, but it seems like it's a lot easier to get mixed up in compose because even view models are constructed inside a composable function.
No, see, again, that's completely your choice, right? Uh, so you can construct view model inside composable if you are managing streams by composable, right?
Right.
As I talked about, you can have a single activity app with multiple composable with no fragment or anything. If you are considering that, then you can go with a constructive view model inside composable. But if you look at my report, right, what I personally prefer is having an activity and let it have the view model, and then pass on the state to the composables. Now, that state you already do separating data and view is not possible, right? Because you already do text view dot set text, right? Instead of doing that, what you are doing is that you are isolating only UI data, right? So UI state or view state should only contain the data that's required by your UI. For example, you have user information, right? And in user information, you have user ID, user email ID, and profile picture and everything. And in the UI, you are only showing picture and name, right?
Yeah.
Then you don't need to have a user class in your state which contains all the information. You should filter it out, and that's what mapping is for. You should so in the business model, your user will have all the data. When it comes to view, you should map business model to view model, not view data model, and you should only take the information that's required by you, and then you should pass it to the compose, and then you can just show it in the UI. I hope that answers to your question.
Yeah. You can feel free to send another question in chat if that doesn't. But like one thing I think is really good about Compose is that it's going to make people think about functional programming more because it tends to fit into
Yeah,
that style of programming. So I would love it if some people like ended up learning these concepts and somebody later on tells them, by the way, that's called functional programming. So
yeah. So for me, I always loved functional programming, right? uh, even wrote a book about it. So yeah, uh, that's why I probably like Compose that much. But yeah, Compose for to learn to use Compose more efficiently or to understand the mental model, I would recommend learning functional programming first. Then you will easily understand what actually composition is. Compose is all about composition, right?
yeah,
Unlike Swift UI, it doesn't use inheritance, or unlike Flutter as well, it doesn't use inheritance. It prefers function composition over everything else. Now, what is composition? That you will only understand when you learn a little bit about functional programming.
cool. So this dovetails nicely into the next question by Nodami Chow. What is the mental model? Like, what kind of mental model should you have when you're learning about Compose?
Yeah. I think I we already discussed that, right? You should first learn functional programming, and other than that, in mental model, see, Compose provides a lot of options, right? If you look at different repositories, different people manage the state in different ways. For example, Shreyas's Naughty repository, that's really good. but he manages data completely different than I manage in my demo repository that Aniket shared here, right? You should what you should think about is how would you like to manage state. Every way has a different set of benefits and a different set of drawbacks. So I would not say any way is superior than other. Uh, for now, everything has its own set of benefits and drawbacks. But you should think about how to actually forget accessing views at runtime. You will never get a instance of a view, and you should actually, basically, if you want to prepare yourself better for compose, you should try out epoxy uh,
Ah,
before using compose. If you want to prepare yourself, you should try out epoxy and managing your entire layout with epoxy uh, before using compose. That will prepare you. So forget about or find view by id or getting reference of view in any way during test as well. What you will get is basically you can you have a state, and based on that you either show a view or you don't, or you set some functionality of the view or you don't. That's all.
cool. Sounds good. All right. We'll take some more questions. And Ashish and Rohan Panchnath both have questions about cross-platform tools like Flutter and Xamarin and how they compare to Compose, or like native versus hybrid. Which
Yeah, age old question.
yeah,
I would say one thing, right? When I first started learning, no, not when I first started, but yeah, when I was around 1 to 1.5 years in Android, right? Cordova came out, and there was another thing that was quite famous at that time. I'm forgetting something, ice or something. I have forgot the name. Ionic, yeah, exactly. Uh, those all came out, and everyone was ravaging about them and say native will gonna go out soon. Native is still here. Xamarin came out. Everyone said, "Hey, Xamarin is using C Sharp and it's quite great. No one will develop Android and iOS apps using Objective C or Java." At that time, there was no Kotlin, there was no Swift, I guess. Uh, it's still here, right? Xamarin, I don't know if anyone is using anymore, but yeah,
yeah,
Flutter came out. Uh, Flutter, I won't comment anything about Flutter, but yeah, native is still here. Native is gonna be here because some of the things, there are some things that you can't achieve with any current cross-platform things uh, anyway, right? Uh, it's gonna be there. But yeah, I would say Flutter and Compose both got inspired from React, right? Not React Native, React, the web development platform. And that's why they built in a similar way.
yeah,
And yeah, Compose started after Flutter was already midway or completely done. Uh, so Compose gets some inspirations from Flutter as well, but Compose is more in line towards React than Flutter because, as I said, React also uses function composition, right? React
yes,
doesn't use inheritance for UI system.
yeah,
Compose also uses function composition. So I would say Compose is more in line with React in terms of declarative and reactive UI development than Flutter. But yeah, Flutter is also gonna stay here for a little, for some more time, I would say. Flutter is also not going anywhere anytime soon. I would not comment about Xamarin or any other cross-platform tools.
yeah. I had actually learned React before I learned Compose. Um, so I so I've gotten used to passing around props, which are basically just function parameters that you're passing into uh, into a UI component so that it can render them. And then when I was reading about Compose, I'm like, I feel like I'm reading the React documentation all over again.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
It feels like so.
And
So, do you have any web
yeah,
development here?
one should read about Leland Richardson's talk. He gave it quite early. Compose was still pre-alpha at that time. He gave a talk about how he and the team designed Compose by getting inspiration from React. I will try to share the link with you if I can get it, and then you can share with the audience.
Um, yeah, that'll be great. So yeah, I think Compose owes a bit of a debt to React, and that is just such a good way of. I mean, so if you look at even routing, the way we do navigation, React has routing, and it's very similar to how you would do it with like modern Android development. So I feel like we're lifting a lot of really good patterns, and maybe it's just React thought of a good idea, and that idea is being very nice, uh, very healthily transplanted to all
Mhm.
like like to several other programming languages, which I think is good for all of us. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas.
Yeah,
So I think we talked about state and data. One of the things that surprised me is I don't think it's super recent, but it is relatively recent. Is that you can do widgets in Android and Compose.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so widgets used to have this limitation that you can use only a certain subset of the view. Like
Remote view or something like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But so does that limitation still apply to Compose? Or
I actually haven't tried getting widget in Compose, right? So I'm not the best person to comment on that. Uh, but I don't think there would be such limitations, right? Because again, Compose can't have a subset because it doesn't use any hints again.
yeah,
So yeah, I think there would be some trick to it. Probably you would have to call Compose in a certain way, but yeah, same. It won't be same to what it used to be before.
so I'm getting a question about Mitra. It has a similar API before React came into the picture. I've never I've never heard of this. Um, has anyone heard of Mitra? Maybe any web developers around?
Uh, can you repeat the question again?
Um, there's a question about Mitra, which is apparently a framework which had a similar API to React.
Okay.
I guess we haven't heard of it, and that answers the question.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that Compose has been integrated into a bunch of things. Like there's recently Google Maps launched that you can do maps with the Compose API, and that was like a great side by side comparison of what it's like to do it of what that's like to do with Compose. Yogesh has a question about how easy is something like augmented reality on Android now. So is that helped by it, or is it like not relevant to Compose, or how does it?
I don't think augmented reality is completely relevant to Compose, right? Even with XML views, we only used to have one surface view, and then everything else is managed by augmented reality platform or tool you are using, right?
Yeah,
Uh, Instead of apart from creating the surface view, uh, the view system has nothing else to do in terms of augmented reality, right?
right.
So I don't think Compose is relevant in this thing.
So Sandeep has an interesting point about cross-platform frameworks, which I agree with, and I think we both kind of agree with. So I'm not going to go into it, but yes, I appreciate that comment, Sandeep. Uh, so does anybody else have any other questions about this? Before we go ahead
I
and
think Sriharsha has a very good point. He said he worked on pure FP languages like PureScript and Haskell, but Compose only feels like FP if you have architecture like ELM.
oh
Otherwise,
yes,
it just feels like reactive UI framework, right? And
yeah,
it's true. Again, if you look at it composed in a pure FP way, if you want to look at it, you have to look at Kotlin as well. Kotlin was developed so in such a way that FP developers, functional programming developers, or who likes FP, would appreciate Kotlin as well as people from pure OOP world, right? Who don't who didn't look at FP yet, would still be able to appreciate Kotlin, right?
Yeah.
And similarly for compose as well, right? If they did a pure ALM, pure functional architecture with compose, right? They would have to change a lot of things in Android system as well, right? How we write activity view model and everything, they would have to touch all of that, and they didn't want that. They only wanted to work on the UI part. So to enable people who want a pure functional architecture, they can have it right now.
Right.
They could not have with XML. They could not have that with XML, but with Compose they can have it.
Yeah.
Compose opens the platform. Now, how you are gonna use it? If you are gonna use it just like a simple reactive UI layer, or if you're gonna basically structure your app in a pure functional way, that completely depends on you, your team, your requirement, your business requirement, and all of those.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've seen people use even something like RX Java in a way that makes you feel like you are looking at object-oriented programming.
Yeah,
So I guess it is the skill of the programmer that can turn whatever you want into the magic that you're looking for.
yeah.
Um, so I want to so if someone has a bit of a complex question, if you want to speak it out, I can invite you all on to just ask that question live. Is there somebody who wants to speak a question out? You can just raise your hand. Nobody wants to speak a question out? Okay, got that. Cool. We're still open to chat messages. You can think about it. So I could invite you on stage. One of the things I wanted to know was that what are some things you wish you knew before you began learning Compose that would have made your journey easier?
Basically, all the things I wish I knew, I immediately started learning those things after I got that first glance into Compass, right? Uh, so I got intrigued by it, and I started learning a lot about declarative UI. At that time, I had no idea what declarative UI is, right? When I first got that user research. So after coming back, I started learning about what declarative UI is, and how different frameworks implement it. Uh, at that point, I learned React a little bit. I learned a little bit about Vue.js, right? And I got the ideas on how to manage state, how to manage events from those frameworks, and that actually helped me when actual Compose P Alpha came out.
Right. Right. That's pretty cool. All right. So
Yeah, so to answer your question, I would suggest that if you have want to be more or better with Compose, you can try out React if you haven't already, and Vue.js. So those are really good web development platforms. So it will serve you in both ways. It will prepare you for Compose, as well as you will have some idea on how advanced the web is. So yeah.
awesome. So oh, we do have some chat messages. We have this is exactly why this question of organizations, teams different. Yep, that makes sense. Uh, great. All right. So, is that all for questions? Do we have any other questions for you? Is that all? All right. So, okay. So, I guess we can begin to wrap it up. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share, Rivu?
No, I think we discussed most of the important things.
Okay. So,
Uh, so yeah, we can wrap it up.
okay. What about you, Honey? You have something to
I'm
say?
good too. Yeah.
Cool. Where can people reach out to you if they have further questions? Like both of you, maybe just.
I am on all the social medias there is that is in India. So if you search me on TikTok, you won't find me. But yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, uh, I am everywhere. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and I generally respond. I sometimes take time to respond. Uh, I also have a life, but yeah, I generally respond. So yeah, you can reach me out.
All right. Great. So I just want to close out by saying that thanks so much. Thanks so much, Honey and Revu. Um, this this has been a talk by this has been a talk by 100ms. We have this really great website where you can try out and build this kind of chat yourself. I built the raise hand feature on the on the Android app side myself, so you can ask me any questions about it if you have them. Here's our website. It is 100ms.live, and you can try it for free. Give it a try and see what you can build with it. We've got app demos, we've got iOS demos, we've got website demos, and we have product hunt number one product of the day on my birthday. That's when we launched last August. So there's a whole lot of tailored use cases here, and we are building out samples for all of these things. So, and you can go live with just a couple of lines of code. If you feel you can't go live with a couple of lines of code, come on Discord and tell us about it. Like, hey, how do I do this thing? So try it out, and I hope that you have a good time with that. Not going to share my password on screen. Okay. Uh, all right. I had a great time with all of you, and I hope to see you all again. You can reach out to me on on Twitter at AniketSMK, and I'm sure you can find Rivu and Honey as well. Be sure to
Yeah,
drop
I am on
comments.
Twitter with at that Rivu Chakraborty. In LinkedIn, you can search with my name. Uh, Hard to miss my face, and yeah, in Facebook as well. You can find me.
Great. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. Do
Thank
reach
you so
out.
much.